right. Well, welcome everyone to our EdSped mild moderate support needs, extensive support needs, and early childhood special education deep dive into version 2 materials. Today is August 20th, 2026, and we're so excited to go over version 2 MPA and LPA with you today. So we have a lot to get through in our time together. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, as a reminder, just what we do in performance assessment and the different credential areas and assessments that we're working on. We have in the green logo, we have our CalTPA for multiple subjects, single subject, and world language. In our beautiful purple logo, we have our PK3 early childhood education credential area. We debate, is this red or orange, reddish orange? We have our 5 EdSped areas, and in our teal color, we have our administrative services performance assessment. Our agenda for today, we're going to go over introductions, have some introductions, go over norms and outcomes. We will share our Google resource folder with you. We will talk about the EdSped CalTPA structure. We will talk to you about accessing materials for this year, how to access faculty policies and resources. Then we will deep dive into MPA first, steps 1 through 4, and all the rubrics. And then Marissa will walk you through LPA, steps 1 through 4. And we do have some helpful hints and reminders about each step as we go through. We'll talk about condition codes, and we'll go over our program support and contact information for the school year. All right, our team. Our director is Juliet Wallleitner, and she is the director of the Division of Research, Data, and Assessment. We lovingly call it DREA, and we work in the DREA team. Again, my name is Julie Holmes. I'm one of the consultants on this team. I am the point person for the math cycle as well as cycle 1, and I will turn it to Marissa.
Good morning, everyone. Marissa Luna Lopez, and I am another consultant here on the Performance Assessment Development team, supporting the Cycle 2 and the Literacy Performance Assessment. And I just saw Patricia jump in, so good morning,
Great.
Patricia.
Hi, yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Patricia Lane. I'm also a consultant on the performance assessment team, and I support CalAPA. So it's great to see all of you this morning.
Great. Thank you for being here. So with that, we'd like for you to open up the chat and introduce yourself. Include your name, your institution, and your position as well. Let's see as those start to roll in that the chat is working. Great. All right. And with that, while you are busy doing that, I'll go over our norms for today. We just ask that you keep your microphone muted unless you have a question. And we will stop very often for questions. And we will, when we end the call today, we will stay on for questions as well. If you could, please keep those questions to a general nature related to the topic. Anything specific to a candidate, you can always email us and we will get back to you. And with that, we just ask that you monitor your time, monitor everyone's time by just moderating your participation. We want to give everyone a chance to be able to ask their questions and be heard.
Real quick to add to this, I know that a lot of folks are anxious for the LPA when we're talking about the MPA or things that are different. If we could, as much as possible, when we're on MPA, we'll talk about MPA. When we're on LPA, we'll talk about LPA. It gets a little confusing, especially when somebody throws something in the chat about the LPA and we're talking about the MPA. If we could, if at all possible, we would greatly appreciate that.
That's a good point. Thanks, Marissa. Our outcomes for this meeting today, we're going to go through, and you are going to become an expert in version 2. We are going to go through these guides with you and update you on any changes to the templates. And then at the end today, as we go through the deep dive, we've got a lot of supports and reminders about monthly meetings, upcoming meetings. There's a lot that's going on this year, and we've pre-planned it all out. So please stay on for the full call, and you'll get a really good overview of what we're offering this year. All right, so Marissa's going to put our Google resource folder link in the chat for you to access the guides, the templates, If you need support with the ADS, the annual data system, if you need to change who your program coordinator is or anything like that, there's the user guide and overview in that folder. If you receive the data each month from evaluation systems, there is a results analyzer navigation guide. And at the end of today's presentation, we will PDF this slide deck and we will put it in the Google folder for you. All right, as a reminder, the CalTPA structure for the EdSped. First, we have the Math Performance Assessment, the MPA, which is learning about students with IEPs and planning math instruction, the math cycle. And the LPA is that assessment-driven literacy instruction for students with IEPs. And with each of these two assessments, candidates are going through the 4 steps of planning, teach and assess, reflecting, and then applying next steps. And that is our structure. And completion of both the MPA and the LPA meets the TPA requirement for their preliminary credential. We've got a lot of materials to share. And again, it will be easier to access these links once we do PDF this slide deck. But here on the left column is the Evaluation Systems EdSped CalTPA Faculty Policies and Resources link. And within that link, you have your required acceptable and unacceptable supports. We have our faculty guidelines for recordings, other resources, assessment materials, prep guides for your candidates. If you want to request vouchers, if you are looking at sample submissions, those will be coming soon. They are not yet online. We still have ones from last year that are available, but don't worry, sample submissions will be coming in a few months. We have to wait for submissions to roll in first. That's why we can't get those up online right now. And then on the right, we have our CTC resources for you. So we've sent these out via listserv. We've put them up in the EQ Weekly. If you haven't yet clicked on our performance assessment webpage on the CTC website, we encourage you to do so because we've got all the version 2 guides and templates, no password needed. It's just available for you to download or share with your candidates so that they can look at it as well. We have a link to the approved passing standard, which is the same as last year. We'll talk about that too. We have a link to secondary passing standard, TPA design standards, and a new link, which is our 26-27 calendar of events. And that's on the left menu of this resource. So you can see and go ahead and register for all future events for this whole school year. Passing standard, as I mentioned, is the same as last year for MPA and LPA. They are both 16 points to pass, with a 14-point secondary passing standard. So if candidates score a 14 or a 15, they are then eligible for that secondary passing standard. That becomes a programmatic decision at that point for you to consider if they have met the TPEs in other areas, such as coursework, observations, and things like that. And again, the link to the passing standard is on the CTC webpage. Our submission deadlines for the year. It's rolling. I can't believe summer's over as I look at this and go, okay, here we go, guys. On the left, if you like to backwards map, that is when the candidate would receive their scores. So if they want to receive their scores by September 17th, then look on the right, and they would have to submit their cycle by August 27th by 11:59 p.m. And as you are all aware, it is really difficult when candidates begin the upload process at 10 p.m. and they are struggling to upload all their documents. They might have a slow Wi-Fi, or the system might be really busy at that point because everyone's there trying to upload their documents. They really need to start days prior. And I know I'm preaching to the choir because I know that you are telling your candidates to upload early. I just want to call out that if you look at the bottom of the right column, the last submission deadline for version 2 is July 1st. So it's a good way to kind of close out the school year because then we move to transitioning to updated versions. So just as a reminder, July 1 is the very last submission deadline for this academic year for version 2. All right, we're going to launch into the MPA, learning about students with IEPs and planning math instruction for mild mod, extensive support needs, and our early childhood special ed group. Just want to talk about some big reminders and big changes this year to the steps for MPA. And you'll notice that I just merged the cells across the 3 because they are so aligned and similar. And as I go through today's deep dive, I will just point out differences. But for all 3, this is a big change, this first bullet. This is going to shock you, but for all 3 areas, candidates select one focus student or child if they are early childhood special education with an IEP or an IFSP. Now, the IFSP is for the early childhood group. That is the individual family service plan and for birth to age 3 because our early childhood group can begin working with students age 3 and above. So again, we'll talk about this when we get in the MPA and the math cycle, but so they are to select and adapt their instruction for just one focus student or child with an IEP. Last year, we had these certain automatic ones, level 1s. If a candidate, for example, had inaccuracies in their math content or they did not use grade level strands or standards, it was an automatic level 1 in rubric 1.1. So this year, you'll see in 1.1, that has been integrated across levels 2 and 3 as well. And I will point this out when we get there. In the Part A template, we have decreased the page limit maximum from 7 pages down to 4 pages because we've moved the focus student or child section over to the Part C template. In Part B, this is another big change. That's the math lesson plan template. And we've decreased from 10 to 5 pages because we've done some things. We've made some prompts more succinct. We've removed some things. And the template is no longer optional. Before, programs were allowed to have their candidates use their own Part B template, but there was a lot of misalignment and candidates weren't being prompted to fully answer all of the questions, and we noticed that it was impacting their scores. So we are asking that candidates use our Part B template. And then Part C, that's the focus student adaptation template, and that page limit has increased from 7 up to 10 pages. And when we get there, I will tell you why, and you will see why. All right, in step 2, these are some big reminders. Again, we had that last level 1 automatic construct last year in version 1. That was teaching of the presented content is inaccurate, or the lesson that was planned in step 1 is not reflected in any of the step 2 videos. So what they planned in step 1 is not what we saw in step 2. So that has been integrated across into levels 2 and 3. We have redesigned the Part F commentary template. It is now aligned by prompt and not the clip. So they're not writing about video clip number 1 and putting heavy text and integrating the prompts within. Instead, you will see they are answering to the prompt and telling us which video clip to go to. And across rubrics 1.5 and 1.6, those are the 2 rubrics in step 2 plan, teach and assess, excuse me. Candidates are required to demonstrate in the video and describe in the commentary. They must do both in order to meet the level 3 rubric. I will point this out, I promise, when we get there. In step 3, in the Part G reflection template, it has decreased from 7 to 5 because we have redone this whole step 3 for MPA. The candidates must now reflect on the impact of their instruction rather than effectiveness. And in step 4, apply, the last construct has changed. Instead of refers to appropriate evidence from steps 1, 2, or 3, they are being prompted to use a specific example or examples from steps 1, 2, or 3. I think this is more clear language. I think referring to appropriate evidence might have been confusing to candidates. So we have shifted that language. Okay, and give me a minute. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the guide. I'm going to use the mild moderate support needs guide for MPA, but I will refer to any changes that would be in ECSE because MMSN and ESN are almost identical. I can't, I'm trying to think of a difference, but they are pretty much the same. What would be different is the candidate's clinical placement setting and the population that they're working with. So I will do my best. I will point out differences because we got 3 big guides to go through, and I want to leave ample time for Marissa to go over LPA as well. So I'll just keep booking it. Tell me if I'm going, my perky pace is too fast. All right, let me do this. What I've done in the past is I'm just going to kind of highlight to kind of point out things. It's a lot of text, so hopefully this is helpful to all of you. I'm going to just point out big changes from version 1 to version 2. All right, you will notice in all of the guides, in the beginning, it gives the candidate and you, the program, again, a reminder. If they are doing the EdSp, CalTPA, mild mod, they are required to provide math instruction to students in grades TK and above, and they are required to teach 1 focus student with an IEP for whom they will adapt their instruction. Again, 1 student. Can they teach 1 focus student plus other students? Absolutely. But the requirement is to at least teach that 1 focus student with an IEP. And of course, for ECSE, every time I say focus student with an IEP, for ECSE, it is focused child with an IEP or an IFSP. Because as you are well aware, with that community, a child might come in with an IFSP and the paperwork's in progress for their IEP, but it might not be in place yet. So it is absolutely allowable if the focused child has an IFSP. And let me just jump over to early childhood real quick, and I'll go to that same section. Here it is. They provide math instruction to children age 3 or older and facilitate 1 math activity to a focused child with an IEP or IFSP. Okay. Let's scroll down.
I was going to say, Julie, did you want to speak really quickly to the early childhood, that please note section there?
Thank you. Yeah, please note. And this is for all. For the candidates, if you are placed in a specialized setting that is not appropriate for video recording, such as a private home, hospital, please meet with your CalTPA program faculty to review the requirements. And here's the link for requesting alternative arrangements. Yeah, thank you.
That's absolutely we put that in all of our low incidence guides, which are ECSE, DHH, and BI. It is available for all candidates when doing MMSN or ESN. The alternative arrangements can be more challenging at times for candidates. So if they have a classroom-based placement, that's where they should do their performance assessment. They do not have a classroom-based placement. We've heard from folks in the field, especially those that go to homes and such, that we wanted to put that note in there so the candidate would be directed to the requirements and the process for requesting alternative arrangements, and so that you all can be familiar with that process. It does require additional steps, so please make sure you review that and guide candidates appropriately.
And it does take a bit of time.
Yeah, that's the big challenge.
It might take some weeks, so start early if you know. Yeah. All right, what we've added to all the guides this year is how rubrics are scored. We realized that we didn't have these in the guides before, so we want you to really take the time and review this with candidates on how scoring is focused on those level 3 constructs and how and what might bring them down to a level 2 and how they need to go all through clear evidence of level 3 to be considered for a 4 and so on for a level 5. The evidence table. let me just point out some changes, and I've already kind of touched upon all of this. Structurally, it is the same as last year, with the exception of selecting one focus student or child with an IEP or IFSP, and then the addition of those changes in page limit size. And when we say up to 4 pages, they do not have to write 4 pages. If they can say it all in a page and a half, if they can say it in 3, 2, it doesn't matter. It is up to the candidate. We just have to give a maximum number of pages because we are, otherwise we might get 40 pages. So again, just letting your candidates know if they're feeling pressured, like, I can't write 4 pages on this. This is, it's just a maximum. Again, structurally, it's the same. They're developing their asset-based UDL-focused lesson that includes their 2 goals, their math content and practice learning goal, and their math academic language learning goal. All right, so let me kind of skip through the evidence table because we do have a lot. We have this whole chapter on submitting your evidence. This used to be at the end of the guide. This used to be right before the glossary. But as Marissa and I would meet with candidates every week at office hours, we would point this out to them and they'd be like, oh, I wish I knew that in the beginning. And we were like, okay, say no more. We'll move it up to the front. And so we put it up to the front to kind of front load everyone on the requirements, how they can name their files, the types of supported file types that are accepted, how to navigate the templates and write in the brackets, all of that good stuff. So it does have a little section here about English translation. This is important if you have candidates in a bilingual or dual immersion setting. And so we have this little additional note that translations or transcriptions are not required for candidates that are teaching in a dual immersion or bilingual setting. They can complete all of their templates and videos in the language of instruction, with the exception of the step 3 reflection template, which must be done primarily in English. Keyword, primarily in English. Doesn't have to be all in English. So yes, if they are in a bilingual setting, absolutely all of their templates and videos can be in the language of instruction because it will be scored by an assessor who is fluent in that language. This also goes through just the specifications. If they're on Part A template, it's just a reminder, up to 4 pages, and here's the supported file types. They use Arial 11 point, things like that. And this is also in LPA. It's across all of our guides. I'm thinking if due to time, I should just jump to, I think I'm going to jump down. Well, let me go over this part because there's a little bit. Template Part A, this is the contextual information about their setting, about the age and grade level that they're working with, the instructional delivery model, the instructional support personnel for whom they will collaborate with for support, the language of instruction in that classroom. So this is the snapshot that really paints the picture of the clinical setting that the candidate is in. Then they're prompted to just select their focus student, but this is not part of the template. Now we get to the math lesson plan. This is the Part B template that is no longer optional. And again, we have our, we call these call out boxes. So if we have a call out box, look at it. We're calling out something important. The use of grade level standards is important. I will talk about this when we get to the rubric. So these are things that we want you to kind of highlight and go over your candidates with. So again, for candidates, it is dependent on their clinical setting. What California State math content strand or standard they are selecting, because it must be a grade level, and they're selecting that one of the 8 math practice standards as well to support it. So it's very important. So this is basically everything, these prompts that you see in the guide is what is in the Part B template. It's the exact same prompts. But I will kind of let you go through these prompts because I want to get to the rubrics and really spend time there. Again, a call out box if the candidate needs support in writing a PK or TK math learning goal. and they're not sure how to navigate those PTKLF strands. If they're writing a kinder through ATP, that's Adult Transition Program, math learning goal. And again, we give examples. If they're writing a learning goal using the core content connectors, and when they're writing their academic language learning goal. We did add a little note in this year's guide because this question came up a lot this year. For candidates that are in a bilingual or dual immersion setting, the academic language learning goal should be in the language of instruction that is being taught. That is absolutely fine. All right, let's talk about Part C, because what has shifted here is all of the focus student information from Part A is now moved into the Part C template. That's why we gave that increase in page limit size. You'll see a lot of bullets here. There's a lot of prompts. What I do like about this is that it's really giving the candidate and the assessor a complete snapshot of the adaptations, the identification of that focus student's specific math learning needs, the adaptation or adaptations that they plan to make. They identify, let me just be highlighting as I'm talking, where they identify the focus student's specific math learning need or needs. When you see that paren S, and again, this is applicable for LPA, it can be one math learning need, or it could be multiple. It is up to the candidate. That's why we don't say needs just without the paren S. They're identifying the adaptation or adaptations that they're going to make for that focus student or focused child for ECSE. They identify the math-related IEP goal or goals that will be addressed in the lesson. And when we get to 1.1, I'm going to touch upon math-related IEP goals because we did expand that a little bit because we realize that not every child might have a math-only IEP goal. They add any additional supports that might be in the focus student's IEP that will support their progress towards the math and ALD learning goals. Then, just like last year, they are describing those adaptations for the focus student that are based on recent learning and observations and/or math assessment results. They're describing the focus student's assets and/or interests. Now, I want to pause here because this is also applicable across LPA and all of our guides this year. If you remember, in the past, we've always said assets, parens, cultural and/or linguistic, right? We have removed that e.g. parens because what we realized is that was serving as sort of candidates were maybe perceiving that as an exhaustive list. It had to be cultural. It had to be linguistic. But as we know, there's lots of student and child assets. So we removed that. So this is their asset-based approach, and they are going into depth and describing those assets and/or it could be interests, that's okay too, that are really relevant to supporting this focus student or child in the lesson. And then they really go into depth about how they're going to leverage them to support that focus student or child and their learning needs. And we do say leverage. I think last year we said build on, similar, but we're going to leverage those. Then this last bullet, they are describing the adaptations that they're going to make for the focus student or child's math learning needs using 2 or more multisensory strategies. Could be visual, could be auditory, kinesthetic, tactile, and the evidence-based practice or research that they're basing their decision. Okay. I am cruising through the guide because I know you're all very familiar. Let's talk about rubrics. This is where we need to spend the majority of our time. This is rubric 1.1 in planning. You will see the big blue call out box because this is level 3. This is the target. This meets the TPEs. So we wanted to really call it out for candidates. So please point this out to your candidates. We want them all to meet the level 3. That is on target. That is what we want. What is above and beyond is the level 4 and 5. And so we stacked those. They are not required, but it's amazing when candidates can meet all of level 3 and then go above and beyond into a level 4. And if they meet all of the level 4 and provide clear evidence of that, then we move on to consider if they have met a level 5. but 3 is the target. All right, let me point out some things real quick about our language in levels 3 and level 2. And this is just kind of a quick little overview if you're unfamiliar with the rubrics or scoring. This first construct is all about the candidate, and it's so important to set them up for success in MPA and when they get to LPA, is that selection of an age or grade level appropriate California state math content strand or standard, or appropriate core content connector if they're eligible for core content connectors, and a math practice standard for that focus student that they plan to teach. Must be on grade level. A level 2 is that they select a California state strand or standard, or a core content connector, and or a math practice standard that is either 1 grade level above or below. So if they are teaching 3rd grade, but they've decided that selection of 2nd grade standards would be more appropriate, then that would automatically bring that candidate down to a level 2. A level 1 would be that they select a strand or standard that is more than 1 grade level above or below the focus students that they plan to teach. This is, I was describing in the reminders, that integration of the automatic level 1, and we've integrated it into levels 2 and 3. So again, if they are 1 grade level above or below, that's an attempt. That would be a level 2 for this particular rubric. So it is important, just always mentioning that as a reminder so you can support your candidates. All right, the next construct in level 3, blue box, that they develop a math learning goal that is clearly based on the selected math strand or core content connector and includes math content and practice. So they have to have both. They go together hand in hand, math content and practice. And so that clear development of that learning goal is based on the selection of course, the content practice that they've selected. Again, you'll see in level 2, I won't read it all to you, but we use the word vaguely. It's vaguely based on the selected math strand standard or core content connector. But they still have to have content and practice to meet a level 2. A level 1, they might have one or the other. So just an important distinction as you're kind of walking through with your candidates. And next, the candidate develops a math ALD learning goal that clearly aligns with the math learning goal that they've set. Yes, we want alignment with the academic language that they are creating for this lesson to align with the content and practice learning goal. And finally, the candidate clearly describes how the lesson will support the focus students' math-related IEP goals. Now, there's a little asterisk here. Let me go here, because we've expanded this. So the math-related IEP goal or goals is any IEP goal that is related to content, to the math content or practice that the candidate plans to teach in the math lesson. So math IEP goal, an IEP goal related to content practice, an IEP goal related to academic language is okay, an IEP goal related to well-being or behavior, something that would impact their access to the math lesson. So any of those types of math-related IEP goals are acceptable. All right, let me talk about level 4. You'll see in the MPA, levels 4 and 5 are very different from last year's version. Level 3, candidates planning clearly includes opportunities for the focus student or child to learn collaboratively to progress towards meeting the math content and practice and ALD learning goals. So they are clearly planning those opportunities for the focus student or child. And level 5, the candidate designs a math lesson that reflects the interconnectedness of math plus an additional academic content area. So when they're planning their math lesson, they are also integrating another academic content area. Could be art, it could be history, it could be literacy, but they are weaving those together. And that would be a level 5. But again, all of level 3, clear evidence, and then they'd be considered for a level 4. And if clear evidence is found, then they're considered for a 5. All right. Since we do not have 3 focus students anymore across these 3 credential areas, we had a little bit more space in the rubric. So this 1.2 is no longer focus student 1. This is about the planning of their UDL lesson. And let me highlight that. And higher order thinking in a safe, positive environment. Now, for early childhood special ed, instead of higher order thinking, it is play-based learning in a safe, positive learning environment. Okay, 1.2, level 3, blue box. The candidate clearly uses information from recent math learning and math-related IEP goals to plan their instruction, right? They're using that recent, not from last school year, something within the past few weeks or months, some sort of what information is guiding them in planning this instruction for this focused student or focused child. The candidate clearly describes how they will engage the focused student in UDL focused strategy or strategies. And again, it could be one UDL focused strategy. That is okay, or it could be multiple. They're clearly describing how they're going to engage the focused student in age and or developmentally appropriate higher order thinking to deepen their math understanding. In ECSE, this is the same thing in age or developmentally appropriate play-based learning to deepen their math understanding. And finally, the candidate clearly describes how they will create a safe, positive learning environment that supports them during the math lesson. I think last year we said create and maintain. I'm not sure if we said that in planning, but this is their plan. They're creating it. They're creating that safe and positive learning environment. Next, let's look at level 4. The candidate plans for a safe, positive learning environment that considers the organization of space, time, and or materials to support the learning needs of the focus student during the lesson or focus child. So it could be space, could be time, could be materials. It could be one of those 3, could be 2, could be all 3. And finally, level 5, that the candidate intentionally incorporates functionally appropriate skills with math learning to increase the focus student or child's independence in real-world environments. I see in the chat, it's candidates will need guidance on how to link lessons to IEP goals that are not explicit math goals. Yes, that's a great thing. Yes, I think that looking at that definition of the math-related IEP goal or goals and giving them guidance on that, in that it could be academic language related, it could be well-being and or behavior in helping them to access the math lesson. Yes, all of those things would be great guidance for them. Thank you for that suggestion. All right, moving on to 1.3. This used to be focus student 2, but now, again, we get a little bit more space and more breathing room. And this is allowing the candidate to really think about how they're going to monitor learning and how they are going to collaborate and work with their instructional support personnel during the lesson. So that's kind of the theme of 1.3 is what I'm saying. The candidate clearly describes how they are going to monitor the focus student's learning. Absolutely. Then the candidate clearly describes how they will collaborate with and or facilitate the instructional support personnel to either do one of these things. Either provide an individualized instruction to the focus student or child during the lesson, or support the daily routines, activities, instruction, and or intervention strategies of other students while the candidate facilitates the lesson. So they're selecting one of those routes in their planning in step 1. An instructional support personnel, and I think we touched on this last year, this could be a paraprofessional. This could be their cooperating teacher and mentor, that is also familiar with the students. This could be the gen ed teacher that maybe the candidate is pushing into the classroom. This could be speech and language pathologist. This could be OT. So there are lots of, it's a very flexible definition for instructional support personnel. These are people that someone that works closely with this class as well, with this group, with this focus student or child, and is familiar with them. This is not a volunteer mom that comes for the day that is pushing in and supporting the students and running a group or something like that. Level 4, the candidate's lesson plan demonstrates a purposeful integration of the instructional support personnel into the environment, into that classroom environment, into their activities, environment, activities, and routines. Notice that and, it's got to be all of those. So this is a purposeful integration. They are really utilizing their support in the environment, in the activities, in the routines to really help and support and maximize that focus student or child's learning. And a level 5, they are collaborating with their cooperating teacher, mentor, instructional support personnel, and or parents and guardians. And why? To identify the focused student or child's assets and or interests, to plan a math lesson that engages that focused student across routines, activities, and environments. So they are reaching out and collaborating with, it could be one of those, it could be all of those, but they are really gathering that information to really identify those assets as they plan their math lesson or activity, and at the hopes of really engaging the focused student or child in the lesson. Okay, I will move on. 1.4, this is your focus student information. So this ties back to the Part C template where they are writing all of that focus student information or focused child information. So in level 3, the planned adaptations for the focus student are clearly based on recent learning. Their planned lesson adaptations clearly leverage the focus student's assets and or interests. Those adaptations clearly support the focus student's math and ALD learning needs. And the adaptations clearly support the focus student's math-related IEP goal or goals. And again, we do link it down here. We do talk about adaptations. We link to the math-related IEP goal definition. We talk about things that are recent, such as observations or assessment results. And then when we get to level 4, the candidate plans adaptations for the focus student to participate in the math lesson by using 2 or more multisensory strategies to support the focus student or child's learning needs. And again, we link I hope you can see it's at the bottom of my screen, multisensory strategies using 2 or more senses simultaneously, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and or tactile. And finally, in level 5, that they're planning for the focus student or child's adaptations draw upon and or refer to evidence-based math practice and or research that's appropriate to the focus student's math learning need or needs. And with that, we're halfway through because planning is 4 rubrics, 4 of the 8. Planning is essential, takes the most time in MPA. All right, I'm going to jump into step 2 because we do have some cool things that I really am excited to share. In step 2, teach and assess. Structurally, it's the same. They're still selecting between 1 to 3 clips that total up to 15, no more than 15 minutes. Doesn't have to equal exactly 15. They can submit 10 minutes, but no more than 15. And assessors will not watch beyond the 15-minute mark. As a reminder, We did start to see this last year where candidates were speeding up their videos in order to crunch everything into a 15-minute window. And if they do that, we cannot assess that video. We can't hear it. It's too fast. It's sped up. It would be condition coded. So remind your candidates, do not speed up your videos. If we can't understand like the chipmunk, so keep it at normal speed. All right, in part E, they are submitting and selecting their clips. We do have a little call out box down here. As a reminder, candidates may edit their clips to ensure that all required elements are in there. That is okay. We don't want a ton of clips because it's just almost too segmented. But if they need to cut out some time, a transition time or something like that, that's not applicable to the prompts, then that's okay. They can do that. And then as a reminder, don't speed them up, please. Don't include music or sound effects, anything distracting like that. We're not looking at amazing editing skills. This doesn't need to be an iMovie or anything like that. But they are allowed to edit and don't speed up. Okay, so what are we looking for across their 1 to 3 clips? What are we looking for evidence of? We want to see that the candidate is demonstrating maintaining a safe, positive learning environment. Now, remember in step 1 plan, we said create it because they're planning, they're creating it. In step 2, they're maintaining that safe, positive learning environment. Next, we're looking for how they're engaging the focus student in appropriate higher order thinking during the math lesson. Now, ECSE, this is play-based learning. So how are they engaging the focus child in appropriate play-based learning during the math activity? They're using a UDL focus strategy. They're implementing strategies to monitor the focus student's progress to support their learning, and they're responding intentionally to support the focus student learning. Those are the 5 things that we're looking for across their 3 clips. In the commentary, as a reminder, commentary that does not align with the video, so what we're reading about doesn't align with what we're seeing in the video, that will not be considered as evidence. And I'll show you when we get to the rubrics what I mean by that. Again, the exact same 5 prompts for their commentary. Let me get to the rubric. If you look at the part F commentary, you'll see that it's in table format. Maybe I should just pull that up real quick. MPA part F. And this is also applicable for LPA. So it is now redesigned in table format and it is organized by prompt. So the candidate is, how did you describe how you maintained a safe, positive learning environment? Tell us the clip number, tell us where to go, the timestamp, what you did. So that's a little summary of what I did. We don't want a long summary. We can see it in the video, but tell us why you did it. We can see what you did, but we can't always understand why you did it. So having them go into depth there is so important. And then describing what was the impact on student learning. They can take this table, copy, and paste it underneath if there's 2 areas, 2 video clips that they want us to look at. So again, candidates they are allowed to copy and paste the table below. And just if there's multiple things that they want us to look at to really showcase that they have met that prompt. Okay, let me go back because I opened it twice. Okay, now we're in step 2. And this is where the candidate's creating that safe, positive learning environment and using that UDL focus strategy to support the focus student or child in making progress. So candidate must provide a clear demonstration and description. So they have to demonstrate it in the video and describe it in the commentary. It must be both for that to be a level 3 of how they maintained a safe, positive learning environment. A level 2, just so we're all clear, we say candidate provides an unclear demonstration and or description. So one of those or both might be unclear. They might provide a wonderful, amazingly clear demonstration of how they maintained a safe, positive learning environment, but they provided an unclear description in their commentary. So again, or it could be both. Both were unclear, but it might be just one that would bring them down to a level 2. So really important to, you know, emphasize this with candidates. The next construct, they're providing a clear demonstration and description of their use of a UDL-focused strategy, a clear demonstration and description of accurate math content. If there are some inaccuracies, and I will be really, really clear about this, because as we're teaching, sometimes we're doing a math lesson and we put the wrong answer. And we catch it. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not an inaccuracy. Um, you know, I saying things all the time, but I catch myself. It might be inaccurate. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about an inaccuracy that is left with the students. So they've been shown something that is, a minor thing, but it is inaccurate. So a level 2 would be a demonstration and or description with 3 or fewer minor inaccuracies when they're teaching that math content instruction, things that they didn't catch. Now, a 1 is a big deal. A 1 is 4 or more minor or a major inaccuracy in their math content instruction teaching. So a major thing, fundamentally, this concept was taught incorrectly, and students or children are going to have to be retaught because it was taught inaccurately. So that is a major thing. So again, this used to be an automatic level 1 last year if they had inaccurate math content instruction, but we've integrated across levels 2 and 3. And again, candidates don't need to worry about, adding something up wrong and they added it up wrong and then they go, oh, silly me, I caught it. And, kids laugh at the teacher and go, oh. That's not going to be counted against them. If they're using an alternative strategy to teach them, that's okay too. That's wonderful. We're talking about little inaccuracies in their math content. So I hope that's helpful. And then finally, a clear demonstration and description of the math lesson described in step 1. This should be a slam dunk. What they plan in step 1 is exactly what we should see and read about in step 2. But you would be shocked at how often we don't see that. And so what they plan for is what they need to be teaching and writing about in step 2. So a level 2 would be that unclear description of what they wrote about in step 1 isn't quite, there's some similarities, but it's not quite, what they planned for. I'm seeing something really different here. And then a level 1, of course, it's just completely different. All right, level 4, they are describing multiple UDL strategies. And a 5 would be that intentional demonstration and description of leveraging the focus student or child's assets and or interests. 1.6, they're providing a clear demonstration and description of engaging the focus student or child in higher order thinking. ECSE, this is engaging them in play-based learning. And finally, a clear demonstration and description of how they monitor and respond intentionally to support the focus student or child during the lesson. A 2, again, would be unclear demonstration and or description, and monitor and or respond. So it might be unclear how they were monitoring student learning, but they might have responded intentionally. Amazing. So one might be really clear and one might be unclear. I hope that's helpful. Level 4, again, demonstrate and describe how they use multiple assessments to monitor and adjust instruction. So they are doing both. They're monitor, adjusting, and they're using multiple assessments. I don't know why it says perennis. It says multiple. It's multiple assessments. And finally, level 5, candidate demonstrates and describes how they connect math learning to real life context to engage, motivate, and or extend. So they are connecting that math learning to a real life context, something in real life, something practical, either to really get them interested, engage them, get them motivated about it, and or take it to that next level and extend their learning. And that wraps up step 2, teach and assess. There were just those 2 rubrics. Step 3, reflect, is really brand new, really plain language. We really thought long and hard about this. And the word of the day for this reflection is impact. Impact, impact, impact. We have said in the past, reflect on the effectiveness of blah, blah, blah. And we weren't getting that reflection piece. So we've changed this up. Hope you like it. I think you will, because we're asking candidates really to deeply think about overall what went well. And think about some specific examples from your planning and teaching. What worked? What went well? Great, tell us. Now tell us what did not go well or as expected in the teaching of your lesson. Now that's kind of getting to the heart and having them think through, okay, well, yeah, this didn't go as I expected. Expected this to happen, but actually this was the outcome. And again, thinking about specific examples. And then impact. Impact, what was the impact on each of the following? Getting to know your students, your focus student before the lesson. I'll go through these on the rubrics. And then tell us overall, did the focus student meet the math and ALD learning goals? Did they meet it? We're circling back to their planning of those learning goals. How do you know they met it? So we're asking them. And then they analyze the impact of the adaptation or adaptations for that focus student or child's learning needs. And did they support? We don't know. You tell us, candidate, did those adaptations support the focus student's progress towards the learning goals? How do you know? Tell us. All right, let's look at the rubric. The rubric might shock you because you might go, oh, blue box, that's a lot of constructs. They're actually more clear because we've broken it apart to be very clear. So they're clearly reflecting on what went well and what didn't go well or as expected. They are clearly reflecting on the impact of getting to know their focus student or child before they taught the lesson. Did that have an impact? Tell us. So what was the impact of the safe, positive environment that they created? What was the impact of their asset-based approach? What was the impact of their UDO-focused strategy or strategies? What was the impact of engaging the focus student or child in higher order thinking or ECSE, this is play-based learning? Then really think about and analyze the focus student or child's progress in meeting those math and ALD goals. How did they do? How do you know? And then they clearly analyze the impact of the adaptations for the focus student or child in making progress towards meeting them. So really thinking about the impact of the adaptations that they planned for and implemented in steps 1 and 2. A level 4 would be that the candidate's reflection demonstrates an understanding that affirming, validating, and or leveraging that focus student or child's interests, assets and or interests influence math learning. And a 5 would be when reflecting on the impact of their instruction. So thinking back to the impact of their instruction. The candidate refers to specific examples from the teaching of their math lesson to determine which strategy or strategies moved learning forward. So we're asking them to think deeply. Think about a specific time or example from your teaching of the math lesson to determine which strategy worked, what moved learning forward. Because sometimes we're surprised when we think back on it and we go, oh, wow, that really worked. That really moved the learning forward when I said this or when I did that. And if you look back at the prompts, we kind of say, hey, think about it, think about specific examples. So really point that out to your candidates to always be thinking about that. And that wraps up step 3, reflect. And finally, now we are into applying next steps. You'll see the word would. What would you do a lot in this step? So this is that future thinking, right? So again, they're describing what they learned and they are using a specific example from steps 1, 2, or 3 to justify their next instructional move for math learning. We, in version 1, said refer to an example, an appropriate example. No, refer to appropriate evidence from steps 1, 2, or 3. And I think that language was just unclear sometimes. So we're saying, hey, think about a specific example or multiple examples from your planning, your teaching, your reflection. What specific thing justifies your next move for math learning for this focused student or child? For number 2, they're describing the next math activity that they would teach. So this is that, what would I do? What would I teach to this focused student or child to advance their math and academic language development learning? Again, we prompted, hey, use a specific example to justify your next instructional move. Now, how would you continue to support your focused student's learning needs or focused child's learning needs during the next math activity? And then we kind of give them a little hint. Think about how you might leverage their assets and or interests. And again, use a specific example to justify your next move. So we're overkilling it here, but we want them to really think about and bring in what they've learned and what they know to justify a next move. Instead of just saying, well, I think I'm just going to do this. No, really think about what you've learned and pull it forward. And then finally, they describe how they collaborate with and facilitate instructional support personnel for that future instruction. So instructional support personnel is in step 1, planning, and you see it again in step 4 for thinking about that next instruction. And finally, the last rubric in the math cycle, that the candidate's application of next steps clearly describes what they learned. It clearly describes how they would advance the focused student or child's math and ALD. It clearly describes how they would continue to support the focused student or child's learning need or needs. Clearly describes how they would collaborate with and or facilitate instructional support personnel in future instruction. And finally, they use a specific example or examples from steps 1, 2, or 3 to justify that clearly justifies their next instructional move for math learning. One specific example is fine, would meet this construct. One clear specific example from their planning, their teaching, their reflection that clearly justifies their next instructional move would meet that construct. And you'll notice in the prompts, I mean, we ask it 3 times. So we are really, setting the candidate up for hopefully success in really getting clarity on what their next instructional move might be. Okay, level 4, the candidate's responses demonstrate how they will continue to leverage the focused student's assets and or interests in future lessons. And remember, we kind of said here in that 3rd prompt, right here, number 3, hey, think about how you might leverage assets and or interests. So hopefully, again, this gets candidate kind of thinking through that whole cycle of their planning, their teaching, their reflection, their application of next steps, and they are continuing that leveraging focus students of their asset-based approach and how they will leverage them for future lessons. And finally, in level 5, the candidate describes how they will apply what they have learned about the focus student or focus child to plan future instruction that clearly reinforces, strengthens, and or extends their higher order thinking related to math and ALD. And ECSE, this is reinforces, strengthens, and or extends their play-based learning. related to math and ALD. And with that, that is the math cycle. So I will pause for questions. I can go back to other rubrics. Marissa or Patricia, if there's something I forgot, you want to jump in and add, I can take questions before we go on a little break before LPA.
And I didn't really see anything come up in the chat either. So if anybody does have any questions, you can raise hand or put it in the chat. That was a really good description and
Thank
walkthrough
you.
of the math performance assessment,
I
Julie.
got a
Thank
level
you.
3 then. I
Yeah,
clearly described it and demonstrated it. Thank you.
Maybe a
right.
4.
Yeah.
I get a level 3. Oh, thank you, Dory. All right.
Yeah.
That's
And for
funny.
candidates, just explain to them a level 3 is an A. A level 3 is an A. A level 4 is an A plus, and a level 5 is an A plus plus. Because
Okay.
oftentimes they see a level 3 and they think it's a C, or
Mhm.
they think it's, oh, that just meets expectations. Meeting expectations is fantastic. Meeting
Yeah.
the teacher performance expectations is an A. And so explaining it to them that way might help some of those that oftentimes as educators, we want straight A's and we were the good student and all of those different pieces. And so
Yeah,
it helps them to know that they
it
are
does.
absolutely meeting. Yeah.
And there's a question in the chat about can candidates still pass if they get a level 1 on a rubric? So as long as their total score totals up to 16, then that meets the passing standard. They can get a level 1 on a rubric. They can actually get um, they can actually get more than 1 on a
Yeah,
rubric
there's
and
no side
technically still
condition.
pass. There's no side condition like that. And as long as that total score is 16 or more, that's the passing. If it's a 14 or a 15, then it becomes a programmatic decision to use the secondary passing standard.
And just for folks that don't know what a side condition is, because I didn't know what that was for a while. There used to be on the version 3 and version 7, if a person got more than 1 on MMSN, no matter what their final score was, it was an automatic fail. There
Right.
is no stipulation in that way in version 2. You just you get up to 16 however way you can, that's a pass. At 14, like Julie said, it becomes a programmatic decision. In an example, I when I was a program coordinator and I had this candidate and she met the secondary passing standard, but I had personally done 24 observations in her classroom over the past 2 years and had seen her do a fantastic job in all of those. She grew, she changed, she took advice, she put it into place, she reflected appropriately. When it came to the TPA, she just did not do well in that reflection component. And so, and she was with that secondary passing, so I was able to recommend her using that. If a candidate meets via the secondary passing standard, they're not going to get a different score report that says that they passed, right? So it's the score report is going to stand, the score is going to continue to stand. It's just the program has the ability to use that score in that secondary passing to be able to do the recommendation.
Right.
And I
And
think,
there is additional paperwork when you use the secondary passing standard.
yes.
So there is I think it's the CL911 form. It is on our website. It is linked in our resource page that we talked about at the front. I'm going to go grab it when Marissa does her LPA section, and I'll put that in the chat so that you can grab that form and understand the types of evidence and paperwork that you would submit if you, the program, deem this candidate, yes, they have met the TPEs in other ways, and even though they got a 14 or a 15 on this assessment, we feel confident that they should move forward, and we will submit additional paperwork for that candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is something you do within your office. It's a programmatic decision. So when you actually go and you recommend the candidate for their preliminary credential, you would submit that paperwork at that time. I think Claire has her hand up. Sorry, Claire. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I was wondering, are we going to get a copy of the slides from the beginning? I looked for it in the resources folder. I
Yeah.
just missed your
The
second
beginning.
big
No worries.
change from step 3, and I was trying to listen for
Oh,
it when you were going over step 3, and I
Yeah, no,
couldn't
no, no,
tell.
no worries. We're gonna PDF this PowerPoint slide deck and we're gonna put it in the Google resource folder after today's presentation.
Okay.
And then we'll also, when we're done recording today, we send it off to our IT department. They convert it to a YouTube link and we'll put it in the EQ Weekly. So
Okay,
anyone
great.
that wasn't able to be here or missed a section, you can go back and rewatch Marissa and I. And as we like to say, the jokes don't get any funnier, but we try.
Dr. Sykes, how you doing? You got a question for us,
Hey,
huh?
Hey, hey, good morning, y'all.
good
Great to see
morning.
you, Dr. Lopez. I had a question. I actually have two questions. One is when the part you were going over about lesson objectives and how that relates to the rubric, and that, we want folks to, that has to be an on grade level lesson objective. That tends to be one of the pieces that really is a challenge for our ESN candidates. And so one of the things we share was like you're doing your grade level objective there, and then when they were talking about their accommodations or how they're addressing the student's IEP, that's where they could reference here is the grade level that the student is currently performing at. Is that accurate or close-ish?
So, okay, you're sorry. I'm thinking through your question. So they're selecting their grade level goal. I'm sorry, the grade level California State strand or standard, right? That matches and aligns with the focus student or child that they're working with. So
Mm-hmm.
they select that same grade level standard. And now or it could be their core content connector, if applicable,
Okay.
if they're eligible for core content and they're at that age. And now when they write their learning goal and they're
Yes.
incorporating, that's when they can really scaffold that, how they're going to get them there.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank
that's
you for clarifying that. That
that's
just that tends to
flexibility.
be the
Yeah.
part like every year I've got in terms of like I'm
Right.
teaching high school students are doing first grade math. I'm like, yep, then let's find that high school standard.
Let's find that high school
And
standard. And they must
and
think,
they just
what? This
dig
is
in and they're like,
crazy.
no. And I'm like, yes. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Here's my second question. I have a candidate that was ESN, or sorry, was mild to mod support needs last year, has completed our course requirements for that, and is coming back to do ESN this year, and they're teaching in an ESN position. They have yet to do their TPA, so they're going to complete those this year. My
Okay.
question is, can we recommend them for both the MMSN and ESN because they will have completed program requirements for both credentials? It's the TPA that they would be doing in ESN.
Sure. As
Yeah.
long as they've met all requirements for both credentials, there's a one TPA rule.
Coursework.
So
Okay,
they
so
just
that
have
does
to do
align. It
one.
doesn't have to
Yeah.
be one in MSN, one in ESN.
Correct.
Not
Awesome.
necessarily. You could if you had a dual placement candidate, or maybe they did one in one year and one in the next year. The performance assessment that they are completing should match the clinical practice setting that they're in, depending upon their program. And that's for all folks that are out there. If you
Yeah.
have a dual program, and we've even seen some intern programs where they've made agreements that they'll do MMSN one year and ESN another year, and so they
Mhm.
can match the performance assessment. That's part of that. There was a PSA that came out about the one TPA rule.
Yes.
So they just and they don't necessarily have to be in the same area, but you do need to have an MPA and an
And
LPA.
an LPA. Awesome. Okay, thank you very much.
You bet. Any other hands up? Hard for me to see my little screen. All right, and with that, I think we can take a little break before we launch into LPA, Marissa.
Yeah, I want to come back at like 10:20.
Yeah, sound good for everybody?
Yeah,
Stretch.
my watch keeps telling me to stand up.
All right, return at 10:20. Don't leave the meeting. Just turn your audio off, and you can turn your camera off, and we'll see you soon.
Hello. Welcome back, everyone. All right, time to talk about the literacy performance assessment. Yay! All right, so again, we'll be looking at the MMSN version of the LPA, but if we could pull up the PowerPoint, Julie, and take a look at some of those shifts from
You got
version
it.
1 to version 2 before we dive into the assessment guide, that would be very helpful.
And I just closed it.
You
Hold
sound
on
like
one.
me.
Why did I do that?
That's the exact thing that I would do. Well, like we
I was
said
trying to
before,
make space and closed it. So give me a second.
yeah. No. Well, like there was a question that we that I saw that came through where there were people asking about if you're only working with one focus student, how do you protect their anonymity in video? And that's a fair question. It's a concern. The the it's a challenge to do so if you're planning for one student and you're teaching that one student. And so the candidate can angle a camera where they could potentially see the focus student, but not necessarily see their face. The candidate could potentially bring in other students that can work in the group with them. Again, the materials need to be planned for the focus student and meeting that focus student's need, or they can bring in a small group. But also, the assessors understand that this is being planned for one focus student. This is all about one focus student, and they would need to see the teaching of that focus student. So it's the anonymity of a student is important, but it's not a video is not going to be publicly posted in any space. They are in some very controlled servers that only certain people have access to. Not everyone at even the CTC has access to all videos, and assessors don't all have access as well. So it's not as big of a concern as some people might think. But what we want to do is make sure that we're calling people by like a first name or a last name only. I think that's a note that we've made. So it's kind of weird when we see these videos where a candidate goes, "Student A, how are you today?" And "Mrs. B, what is your," unless she's Mrs. B all the time. But truly, it's something to, be genuine, be authentic in these pieces. If you call a student by their first name on a regular basis, don't confuse them and call them something else in the videos. It comes off odd. And so and it makes the whole situation a little bit more challenging, because whenever a camera starts rolling, things start to feel a little awkward. And so one recommendation that I had for candidates when I worked with them is start recording lessons with the student or students that you're going to work with on a regular basis, and just let them know we're just recording because I'm watching these videos and I'm wanting to improve myself. And if the students get more comfortable with the camera, they will start to ignore the camera and they won't recognize when it's this big high stakes thing. I remember when I worked in a school district before all the Common Core stuff came and we were trying to get our scores up on the test. We had this outside consulting company come in, and they would come in and do these observations where they were just taking like notes, and then we'd get a score and such. And I remember one of the students had to go to the restroom, and he came back, goes, Miss, the guy with the suit, he's here." And they knew that all the teachers, when they saw this guy in a suit, that they were all, they'd get a little nervous because he's coming in and doing this kind of assessment of teachers. But it's a thing. The kids know, they understand, they see these things, and we want to make sure that it's as normal for them as can possibly be when we film. So that was just a quick question that came up in the chat. But yeah. And any advice you have for one another to support working with candidates is always welcome. But one thing I always tell people is, if you're recording, make sure you know the size of your file that you're recording. Put it on airplane mode, so that phone call from that telemarketer that says you've been approved for this loan, right? That doesn't mess up your video. And absolutely focus on just, what the task ahead of you. All right. So LPA, assessment-driven literacy instruction for students with IEPs. You have noticed that we are all together today talking about MMSN, ESN, and ECSE. They are oftentimes very similar credentials, oftentimes overlap in certain spaces, but taking a look for ECSE, we're talking about emergent foundational reading skills, and we are also looking at children versus students. They are all students, they're many times children, but in the MMSN and ESN, we get into young adults as well, because the age range of those students are typically at TK up through ATP. So we'll refer to them as students, and like Julie was saying, for ECSE, we refer to the students they serve as children. The shifts in the in the LPA. Now, the learning segment template has been renamed. It's now a unit plan. That unit plan consists of a scope and sequence and 3 lesson plans. There was a choice last year where they could have 3 to 5 lesson plans. It's just 3. So, let me see here. I'll pop that in real quick. I saw that. The scope and sequence and the 3 lesson plans, the page limit for that template is 24 pages. They can have a 10-page scope and sequence, and then 4-page lesson, 7-page lesson, and I don't know how many pages I have left because I'm not very good at math. But as long as its total is less than 24 pages, they can slice and dice that page limit however they want. Because last year was 5 pages per lesson kind of thing. This year, and then education specialists also get an extra page per section because they are asked more questions about IEPs and different accommodations that they're making. So there is a little bit more pages than candidates who are general education candidates get for that learning segment template. The template for the learning segment, now unit plan, no longer includes tables. The tables were a little bit laborious for folks. They didn't carry over pages oftentimes, and so they jump, and you'd have this blank space, and then we just don't want assessors like with a trying to measure this many pages. We're not going to. They're all prompts. Then so the candidate would follow that way. Instead of identifying ELA, ELD standards for each lesson, right, the candidate is going to identify those standards for the unit. So they will say, this is my unit. I am working with a focus student, and we are going to write a paragraph about opinions. We're going to do an opinion paragraph, my favorite dessert, whatever it is. They're gonna, And so the standards that they would need in order to address foundational reading skills and the additional theme to do that unit are the standards that they all identify in their scope and sequence. Then they will develop a goal for the unit, and that will consist of an ELA literacy goal and an ELD goal. The ELA literacy goal is 2 pieces, foundational reading skills and the additional theme. The ELD is to support the foundational reading skills and the additional theme. So they will be developing a goal for the unit, ELA literacy, and it could be 2 goals or 1, depending upon the preference of the candidate, and an ELD goal. Then the candidate will use the learning goals for the unit to create the learning goals for each of the lessons. So if the end game is writing this opinion paper, if the end game is walking down the street to a local store and making a purchase, and there's some functional reading skills in there and such, whatever it is the end goal is, the lessons that build up to that end goal, to that summative assessment, that's how we get that progression of learning, right? So we have this big goal at the end, and then we'll have mini goals getting there. The candidates are now asked to plan for formative assessment in each lesson. Before, we had to have 1 formative assessment across 3 lessons. Now we're asking for 1 in each lesson. The summative assessment is not going to be the 3rd or final lesson any longer. It's a summative assessment after they teach the 3 lessons. So the scope and sequence will be all of the materials that are like an overview of the unit, then lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, and then they will do the summative assessment. And during lesson 1, lesson 2, and lesson 3, there will be a formative assessment that helps to drive instruction. So part C, which previously had formative assessment, will only be describing the summative assessment. And part D does have a page limit up to 3 pages. a blank copy of the summative assessment rubric and or performance criteria. We are still having a conversation about that because there are some folks that are saying, oh, what if the summative assessment's a little longer? We may give instruction to assessors to score an entire Part D, but we will keep you updated on that information. So the summative assessment is not part of the 3 lessons. No, it is no longer part of the 3 lessons. We need to see 3 lessons that build up to the summative assessment. It's challenging to see a progression of learning when you only have really 2 lessons to get to it. So that's why we were hoping to move it to the 3 lessons, summative assessment at the end. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So the video clip emphasis areas have changed. Video clip 1 is that foundational reading skill, or for you ECSE folks, those emergent foundational reading skills. Video clip 2 is where that candidate is really going to be looking at that additional theme. Video clip 3 is around integrated ELD, and video clip 4 is assessment of literacy, where a candidate will be providing a formative assessment and then responding intentionally. And oftentimes an intentional response is adjustment and instruction, but it's whatever makes sense based on the summative or based on the formative assessment. Now, last year we did have a video clip that had to do with providing specific actionable feedback to the focus student. We don't have that in step 2 anymore. That has all moved to step 3. So any specific actionable feedback is going to be based on the summative assessment and is going to be in step 3. But step 2, and this is something too, especially for those candidates who are doing a process or a performance-based summative assessment, some type of oral exchange, they need to make sure they record that. I used to tell my candidates, I miss my candidates, you can tell, but I used to tell my candidates, let the cameras roll, let it roll, keep it going. You can always delete video, right? But you can't get something back that you didn't record. So please just let the camera roll, keep those videos, and lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. And another question we often get is, what if lesson 1 goes on to day 2? Sure, that's fine. It's three periods of instruction, but everybody has different time frames for periods of instruction. Every student has a different tolerance level for how long they can work on something. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be like a 2-hour block of time to do ELA literacy, because that's not always accessible. So 3 complete lessons, it doesn't matter how the candidate slices and dices how they record, but they do need to record all instruction. They should record all formative assessments, and they should absolutely record that summative assessment if it's a process or a performance. If a candidate is giving some type of, let's say it's a student that's doing a multiple choice assessment and then short answer and they're typing, they don't need to record a student on the computer, addressing that. That's not what they're going to submit. They're going to submit the results of that assessment. If the student is writing something, if the student is doing some kind of diorama or whatever, if that's what they'll submit that. But if it's a presentation on that diorama and they have a rubric and they're going through, they should make sure to record that. Because when we talk about condition codes, we have had a lot of conversations about this, because the removal of many condition codes last year left spaces where we're like, okay, what do we do? And so the one decision that we have come to as a performance assessment unit is we need a complete submission. And without the recording of a summative assessment performance, and that's how it's designed, we can't make a decision. It's challenging for assessors to look at step 3 and see if what the candidate is reflecting on is correct without the evidence. So we need complete submissions. So let the camera roll, record all lessons and assessments. If they want to record a product-based, lesson, or sorry, a summative assessment, they're more than welcome to. Again, you can always delete video, you just can't get it back. Then, as Julie showed you, the commentary, how it's aligned by prompt, not clip, what they are doing, why, and what was the impact, that is the same in the LPA, and the candidates can copy and paste that table to give us as many examples of each of the prompts as needed. Now, we've had the question in the past is because there's 3 lessons, do I have to show you each of those things 3 times? No, right? You don't have to give us a highlights reel of the lessons for each of those prompts. One solid example is enough to meet rubric constructs. And so what I would advise candidates to do is to look at what they did and give your best example. And that's why you let the camera roll, because you might think your best example is going to be in lesson 1, but it really was from lesson 2. And you weren't anticipating that, but the question that you ask and then the response that students gave and then the way that the candidate responded intentionally, that might have been better in the second lesson than the first one, but we were anticipating the first one to be. So it's always good to let the camera roll and choose which clips that they think are the best representation of them meeting the rubric constructs. Let's go ahead and take a look at step 3. The page limit has been increased from 4 pages to 7 pages. Everybody's like, oh no, that means more work. No, but we did break things down a little bit further to allow for candidates to really get through this process and to ensure that they had enough space and they are not cutting things out of their reflection. Reflection process is challenging, and I think in today's society we don't do a whole lot of reflecting. We don't spend a lot of time meditating and reflecting and thinking about how things happen and how they could have gone differently and how we can improve going forward. And so it might be something to work on and teach candidates as they go through. And there's people that have been teaching for 20 years and they grow and learn and become a more dedicated teacher, and then there's people that have been doing the same year 20 times, right? They don't ever learn, grow, or do anything. We want reflective practitioners who grow and learn and move with the times, not someone doing the same year over and over again, not doing anything different. And let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide. So there haven't been many changes to step 4, but other than the commentary template that's been updated, but it is absolutely based on that focused student or focused child's summative assessment results and what happened during the unit to drive the instructional decision. What is next? Are we going to extend? Are we going to reteach? And why? All right, Julie, if you could, I would greatly appreciate you pulling up that. And those of you that have been getting a glimpse here, these are all open and available to candidates. Please link our website to yours. So that way they know that we have office hours every Wednesday starting in September from 4:15 to 5 o'clock. They can come in, ask us questions. They can pull down any of these materials and get going on their performance assessments. Now, if you could scroll to the 2.1. All right, so some of you may have seen an interruption in the availability of materials because we released everything in July, and then all of a sudden you look in August, you're like, what's going on? We noticed an error in rubric 2.1. It didn't impact any of the EdSp templates, but it impacted MMSN and I believe ESN. There's an and or where there should just be an and. Sorry about that. That's me. That was my bad. But we caught it and we had to reprint materials. So you should see an assessment guide that says 2.1. The rest of the templates say 2.0 for all the EdSp areas. They're all good. I believe that the VI and DHH materials all say 2.0 because there was no issue with those ones.
Correct.
It was just in MMSN, ESN. Was ECSE impacted? I can't remember.
I can't remember. We're gonna have to look.
Yeah, we'll have to look. Maybe we can do
pull it
that.
up right now?
Yeah, let's
right
chat.
now.
Let's do it real quick
I
because
got the
now
resources.
I don't like thinking about the mistakes that I make.
Oh gosh.
Don't worry, I beat myself
There it
up
is.
again. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Don't
Okay.
worry, I beat myself up about it for a while when I saw it. I was like, ah. But yeah, so it is 2.1 for ECSE as well, but VI and DHH should not be impacted. So truly, it was just that one rubric. And when we see something in a construct that's going to impact scoring, we have to address it as soon as possible. So if you have any of these materials and you pulled them down in July because you were just like, I'm on it, please make sure you replace them and just let candidates know and make sure you check that rubric 2.1 because it is in 2 constructs where it says and or. So, all right. We can go back to MMSN. Thank you. Scroll down. Our preamble, keep on going. 2.1, Janet. This is the same authorization statement that Julie went over. We do have that same statement for alternative evidence. And again, a candidate is able to teach one focus student. They can teach one focus student in all special education areas, or they can pull a group. They're not required to pull a group, but they can if they choose. So let's go ahead and keep scrolling down. Overview. All of this literacy material is a really interesting read. Take a look at it. Now, this instructional and cycle is intended to be completed with students in TK and above. Now, for ECSE, VI, and DHH, the age is 3 and above. Now, we do recognize that there are challenges in ECSE placements. It's around the age of students and emergent foundational reading skills. There are limitations on how this assessment has to be given the requirements of SB 488. It is replacing the RECA, and while the concern I get oftentimes from folks is, I have these interns and they're working with these birth to 2-year-olds and this, right? But the credential that they're earning has an authorization statement up through kinder. And so we have to make these assessments bridge that space. So, yeah. All right. Let's take a look at the evidence table. Oh, the question about collaborative learning. The candidate doesn't necessarily have to, or the student doesn't necessarily have to collaborate with another child. They can collaborate with the teacher to come to other understandings, with a paraprofessional to come to other understandings. You can pull in another student, but a collaborative learning does not necessarily have to happen between children. Sometimes it's more challenging, especially if you're working in one of those ESN settings, or to have students of similar ability. Because when I was a moderate severe teacher, when I taught special education, I had 14 different students and 14 different lesson plans and 14 different levels of need in my classroom, and it was very challenging to group them together. It was more putting people together that they could like sit with and behave and be calm with, and then being able to work and turn. And so the collaborative learning collaboration can take place between teachers and students. So, okay. So, as I was saying in the overview when we were in the slides, but step 1 with guidance and support from that cooperating teacher and supervising faculty, gather and review recent available literacy assessment data and other contextual information about that focus student. If the candidate is working with the same focus student from the math cycle, a lot of this will be a carryover. So depending upon how they are supported and how they're working through performance assessment in your program, it could be a carryover. They would identify appropriate grade level ELA strand standards for the focus students' assets, interests, and our learning needs. Now, as we just had that conversation about appropriate grade level ELA strand standards, then they go on to develop an ELD goal for the unit plan, right? And that's that developmentally appropriate learning goal. So we are using materials that are developmentally appropriate. We're not giving, even if we do have a student in high school that is reading at an elementary school level, we're not giving them elementary school level looking stuff. It's a little disrespectful for those students. We want to make sure we're respecting their age, their grade, and that we are still addressing their learning needs. Then the candidate is going to plan 3 lessons that align and build upon one another. So they need to go together, they need to build upon one another to get to that summative assessment. And now the candidate has the choice, right? They have the choice of planning 1 lesson that is around foundational reading skills, and then the other 2 that are additional theme, or they can do foundational reading skills in all 3 and the additional theme in all 3. But all lessons must integrate appropriate ELD. So if they choose to do one lesson on foundational reading skills and then the other two on the additional theme, every lesson needs to integrate ELD. So it's just however they choose to do foundational reading skills, additional theme, that's their choice, but every lesson has to integrate ELD. Then each lesson has to have that goal for foundational reading skills. And it says and or because, again, they may choose to do one or the other. Then that ELD learning goal, and each lesson needs to include a formative assessment. When we look at rubric 2.1, you'll see that there is a construct that asks for a formative assessment in each lesson. And the last component there is they plan their summative assessment to be administered after the third lesson. That will measure the learning goals from the unit. So they are measuring the learning goals from the unit, not necessarily any one specific lesson. So the formative assessment that they will have within a lesson will measure what's happening within that lesson, but the whole thing, the summative assessment, goes with the unit. If you could scroll up a little bit, Julie, I'm sorry, just to look at the contextual information, unit plan, 24 pages. Again, we gave an extra page for the scope and sequence and each lesson for SPED candidates as they have a couple more prompts to answer. The summative assessment description and copies of the blank assessment and rubric or performance criteria. So we did have a little bit of a name change. All right, step 2, teach and assess. This is where the candidate is teaching and video recording all of their lessons and assessments. And again, if the candidate is doing a product-based assessment, they may not need a recording of that because that's what they will upload. They will upload that product. But for many, especially in the early childhood space, many times the summative assessment is an oral conversation. We've actually had the question about a two-part summative assessment where a student may be doing a component that's oral and a component that it's written. If we do have a case like that, the candidate could upload the video and then on the rubric, when they have the scored rubric performance criteria, they could have other pieces of evidence there and keep it that way, or they could just upload the rubric with the written component of the assessment. But if you do have any questions on how a candidate can upload their summative assessment, please do contact us because we want to make sure that we're supporting students, and especially when they are looking at that unit plan. It's very much so in the first step of what is your summative assessment? What are you planning to collect from students or from children? And by looking at that before they get going, it might help them to understand how they're going to upload it, because having that evidence for assessors is going to be important so they can make those instructional decisions. Then the candidate is going to provide their commentary for their video clips. And again, it could be one video clip, 2, 3, or 4. High school teacher for MMSN. None of the students have a foundational literacy goal. So do we have a link to that white paper handy that somebody could possibly put in the chat?
Yeah,
Oftentimes, yeah, thank you, Julie. Oftentimes, Samantha, what candidates have referred to, especially working with anybody that's above the age of 5th grade, right? Because that's where those foundational reading skills, they use language goals and fluency, root words, some of those. Let me see if I have it here. Can you put PDFs in the chat? Does it let you do that anymore? I don't know. I know that's something in Teams that they don't let us do, but let me see. No, it's not letting me. But we have a CDE white paper with a table, and the table really helps to visualize for candidates like what foundational reading skills a candidate could use in demonstrating the requirement of SB 488, and it goes like grades 6 through 8 and then grades 9 through 12. So like Greek and Latin affixes and roots, patterns of word changes that indicate different meanings or parts of speech, conventional spelling, using consolidated knowledge of the written language system, and fluency, reading fluency. And so Yeah, I believe, I believe that paper is in the resource folder. I think I added it in there. But that is
Marissa, I put it in the chat
oh,
real quick.
perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you so much. That is a really good resource because it is a challenge to understand what foundational reading skills we do with those older learners. Okay. Do, 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 do. Okay. Yes. All right. Thank you. Okay, taking a look at step 3, analyzing the results of the summative assessment. This is where that candidate is going to get into that specific actionable feedback. Before, the video clips required specific actionable feedback in step 2. It is all moved to step 3. Then they're going to analyze the results and provide feedback to the parents as well and reflect on the impact of their instruction. And I know that last year the word was effectiveness of their instruction, and oftentimes when they talk about the impact, it seems like a similar thing that they're talking about the effectiveness, but when you say I'm not effective, that is a little like, oh, that kind of hurts a little bit. It's hard to say that, especially when I'm trying to pass this performance assessment and such. But if you say, that didn't have the impact I thought it would, right? That has a little bit more of a positive connotation to it and allows for candidates really to be more clear about what they do. So we're looking for the impact, not necessarily the effectiveness, but sometimes they can be a little interchangeable. And then step 4, this is where the candidate looks at what happened and makes a decision, an instructional decision. Now, Julie has talked about working with a professional development when she was in her teaching years and saying that they need to go through at a perky pace. I love that. Perky pace is one of my favorite Julie-isms. But the candidates need to be reminded to work through this at a pace because there is a requirement in step 4 for additional video. And oftentimes I would see when I was working with teacher candidates, they would get all their planning done, record all 3 of the 5 of their lessons, because this was in a previous version, in October and say, you know what, I'm going to have time over Thanksgiving break. I'm shooting for that December submission date anyway. I'll work on it then. Get to it and realize they had to do a follow-up instructional piece, and it was following up 6 to 8 weeks later, right? And by then it's gone. And anything that they could have, it ends up being kind of staged and stilted and not really useful. So understanding that when they give that summative assessment, they need to score it and go back as soon as possible to be able to teach that follow-up instruction and capture that video. So just a heads up for some of you, especially that are new to this and are working with candidates. They do have a video requirement in step 4, and so getting through from step 2, scoring in step 3, reflecting, and then getting to step 4, there needs to be a pace to it. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at and this submitting your evidence. All of this is the same from the MPA, and it's putting it to the front. Go over it with the candidates, please. Sometimes people look at these things as this scary thing, and a lot of times things are scary when you don't necessarily understand them. But then when you get into it, you're like, oh well, yeah, I do that. Okay, well let's do this together. So helping people to see what's required of them to start with can take down some of that effective filter. So, all right. So the candidate is going to plan a literacy unit that consists of scope and sequence, lessons, and assessments, formative and summative assessments. They're going to plan this within their clinical practice space. This is intended to be completed with students in grades TK and above for MMSN, ESN, ages 3 and above for ECSE. Now, all candidates should be supported by a cooperating teacher and supervising faculty. So they are not intended to go off and do this alone. This is not something that at the beginning of the program you say, hey, you got to do these TPA things. Let me know how it went. It's turning your stuff to the credential analyst after that. These are supposed to be intentionally incorporated into program and supported by both faculty and mentors, district and faculty. And sometimes if you're a small program, you might be the instructor and the mentor right? But oftentimes there's an instructor and then there's a mentor that's assigned to these candidates to do their 12 observations each academic year. That person should be supporting the folks as well. Let's go ahead and scroll down. That contextual information. This is very similar to last year, but again, their candidate is selecting a focus student that meets one of these conditions. We can go ahead and scroll down. So English learner, district identified literacy related disability, an IEP in the area of foundational reading skills, or they may benefit from support with making progress towards ELA literacy standards. Okay. So the candidate will list some information about their student, and they really should have an opportunity to get to know their students before completing these components. So let's go ahead and keep scrolling. All these call out boxes have a lot of really good information. I have a tendency to just skip over stuff, but spend some time talking to candidates and read it with them so that way they understand. Oftentimes, especially like multi-tiered systems of support. I remember when I was teaching an inclusion class to general education candidates, I was like, "Do you guys know what MTSS means?" And they all, yeah. I was like, "Well, tell me what it means." And they were like, "Oh, okay, can you explain it?" And so we did. We spent some time talking about it because oftentimes adults, they don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to say they don't know something, especially if they're interns. They're going to just nod along, and inside their head, they're going, "I don't know what you're talking about." So we want to make sure that we are taking the time to explain these things to candidates. And, this is the space where they learn about it. So the unit plan. Now, this is where the candidate is going to either integrate foundational reading skills, additional theme, and ELD. They have that choice. They can do one lesson on foundational reading skills or integrate foundational reading skills across all three with the additional themes. So the additional themes are meaning making, language development, effective expression, and content knowledge. Now, it says they can pick one or more additional themes. It's always better to just pick one. It's enough with foundational reading skills and an additional theme. Oftentimes we get these candidates are like, "I need to do everything because that's what this assessment has." We give a lot of voice and choice to candidates, but truly picking one foundational reading skill and one additional theme is enough for this mini unit of instruction. But ELD needs to support foundational reading skills and the additional theme. And let's say the candidate picks a focus student who is not an English learner, they still need to plan for English language development. Everyone needs support with language development. ELD is intended for those who are designated as needing additional support, but because of the requirements of SB 488, the requirement for ELD has shifted out of what was Cycle 1 MPA into Cycle 2 LPA. Let's go ahead and scroll down. So they will explain how they'll apply findings from previous literacy assessments and learning, and the student's IEP to identify learning needs. Then they will select one or more grade level appropriate ELA literacy strand standards or developmentally appropriate core content connectors. Now, core content connectors are aligned with the assessments that candidates or that students take. So there are not core content connectors for every single grade level. It's a challenge when a student has an IEP that states that they are using the core content connectors, but they're not in the aligned 11th grade. They can use the core content connector at 11th grade when they're in high school. They should be using the one that's as closely aligned to their grade level and what they're doing in the classroom as possible. And I believe core content connectors start at 3rd grade. So it's a challenge for ECSE folks. They will be working with the PTKLF. Through TK and Common Core state standards up until for kinder, 1st and 2nd. If a candidate is working in a dual language setting, the only dual language that we are able to work with in the LPA is Spanish. That is simply because we are utilizing materials that the CDE has created and put out, and they have not released anything in any other language than Spanish. So they can use the Common Core in Espanol, and they can use Spanish Language Development or SLD standards. But if they are in a dual language setting and it's an Asian language, we do not have any materials for that, and so it needs to be done in English. Then, using the standards identified, they create a developmentally appropriate ELA literacy learning goal for the unit. It says a parens S because they may choose one goal for foundational reading skills and one goal for the additional theme. Or they can say one goal that includes foundational reading skills and one goal that includes the additional theme. Then they need to select and list one or more grade level appropriate ELD strand or standards that support they will teach across their lessons. So the ELD goal will be across for the unit will be across their lessons, and then their ELA literacy learning goals will be across their lessons. So this is all in the scope and sequence right at the beginning. Let's scroll down a little bit. Then they'll make that ELD goal for the unit. Then they will identify and describe the foundational reading skill, right? This is an opportunity for you faculty, for the candidates to really get into what their foundational reading skill is, and we wanted to put it front and center. So there are oftentimes candidates that identify a foundational reading skill that is not a foundational reading skill. And the definition of foundational reading skills is in the glossary and it is underneath the rubrics. But please, if you think the candidates understand what a foundational reading skill is, go over it with them again, because it's something that it's a foundation. The scope and sequence is the foundation for this performance assessment. And if they leave out a foundational reading skill, if they leave out an additional theme, if they leave out English language development, they will not pass. The rubrics have been restructured and they need those major key components that are outlined in Senate Bill 488 to be able to meet this literacy and performance assessment requirement. So please make sure that you are focusing on what those foundational reading skills are and providing them with the materials to ensure that they are addressing foundational reading skills and the additional theme. And it says at least one additional theme. Again, I don't ever recommend to somebody that they do more than one. It's always, but it's up to the candidate to do one or more. Then they'll summarize their pre-planned lessons. This summary does not have to be a super extensive summary. It could be a 1 to 2 sentence summary of basically what these lessons are about, because what we're looking for is that progression of learning. How is lesson 1 being, the information we learn in lesson 1 being utilized in lesson 2 to be utilized in lesson 3 to get us to the summative assessment? That's where we want to see that progression of learning, right? And that's where the candidate is going to explain how they align, how they go together, how they build upon one another, how they are building towards that summative assessment. And then they're going to summarize how the summative assessment will measure these goals. Now, the question that we've often gotten, and I need to make sure we clarify for folks, is about, does the foundational reading skill and the additional theme and ELD need to show up in the summative assessment? And they should, but it always depends. Now, if you're working with a candidate who's working with TK students and the major focus of their unit is around that foundational reading skill, and then they are using phonics to phonemes and sounding out and building some words and then giving some meaning to those words by with some of those activities, then we would see that in the summative assessment. But if you're working with an older student who may be using fluency as their foundational reading skill, my goodness, sorry. But they're using fluency as like a foundational reading skill, and they are fluently reading material to be able to get to an additional theme of writing some type of paragraph, summary paragraph, whatever it is. We would need to see that foundational reading skills were part of that, but you don't necessarily have to have a construct on a rubric that is specifically assessing the foundational reading skill. But we need to see that the foundational reading skills are part of what is being summatively assessed. And I'm sorry if that was a bad explanation of that. And then My little dog barked right there. Throws me off. But truly, this summative assessment should measure the goals for the unit, and it really depends on what the candidate is doing. But if we see that the summative assessment is that end game of the unit, then they're good to go. In each of the lessons, the candidate needs to include ELA literacy goals based on the goals for the unit. And again, each of those lessons should build upon, they should be going together, they should align, they should build upon and end up at that summative assessment. The ELD learning goal, they also should be based on the goals for the unit, and they support the foundational reading skill and the additional theme. Then we ask candidates to summarize their lesson activities, describing how they plan to address the foundational reading skills if applicable, because they do not have to have foundational reading skills in all lessons if they choose to do one lesson of foundational reading skills and the others with the additional theme. How they plan to actively engage students in the additional theme, and how they plan to integrate ELD to support foundational reading skills and the additional theme. Again, they need to have integrated ELD in each of their lessons, how they're supporting the language in each of their lessons. Samantha, I see your question about should the candidate explicitly describe why their summative assessment doesn't have foundational reading skills somewhere if it does not appear in it. I don't think so. The assessors are every one of them are talented, creative, wonderful people that hold the same credential that the candidate is seeking, and they can see that the summative assessment is measuring the goals. They don't necessarily have to look at it and justify it, but they will have an opportunity to describe their summative assessment and how it measures the goals for the unit. The candidates would then go on to describe UDL instructional strategies they plan to use, strategy or strategies. They describe how they plan to actively engage the focus student, how they plan to leverage their assets and interests. And as Julie was saying, we did listen to folks because, you know, they saw a cultural and or linguistic, and while many assets are cultural and linguistic, there are others that, and people were thinking it was an exhaustive list, and it wasn't intended to be. Describe their formative assessments, because again, they will have a formative assessment in each lesson, and then adaptations they'll make to address the learning needs of the focus students based on their assets, interests, and or learning needs, and how they will plan to collaborate with and or facilitate instructional support personnel. So whoever it is that they are working with, how they will collaborate with them or facilitate them. All right, let's go ahead and all these call boxes have great examples. Please go over them with candidates, have them read and practice. It's one of the strongest pieces when somebody can write a really good learning goal, right? And special education teachers tend to have a lot of practice in writing goals and objectives. And so we don't see as much of a challenge in this world, but people have to learn that behavior, criterion, and conditions, how these goals are being written. In summative assessment description, Pamphlet C, this is where the candidate will, after they teach the 3 lessons, plan to use one summative assessment that measures the ELA literacy and ELD learning goals that they outlined in their scope and sequence. Now, the candidates, they can have a summative assessment that is a process, a performance, or some type of presentation here. So product, process, or performance. They can candidates can have students work collaboratively during instruction, but the individual student must demonstrate their own progress on the summative assessment. So group work is always good, but when it comes down to what we know individually, they need to have a way to know that one student knows something. So for the summative assessment, they will ask the candidate to restate their learning goals from the unit, scope, and sequence. If we could scroll down a little bit. Then they'll indicate what they're planning to collect after that 3rd lesson. Then they'll describe the summative assessment they plan to implement after the 3rd lesson and what evidence they'll look for in the student's response to indicate that they are progressing toward meeting or exceeding the ELA literacy and ELD goals. The next section here is blank copies of the assessment and the rubric. And if it's questions that they're going to ask, they could just list those out. But performance criteria or rubric is also an upload that they would put here. Go ahead and dig into the rubrics here. Okay, so these are some pretty dense rubrics. But so looking at rubric 2.1, this was where there was an error where it should say and or. I'll point it out specifically, but if you're looking at rubric 2.1, you need to be looking at version 2.1. So this was the rubric where there was an issue. But if you look at rubric 2.1, the themes are strands and standards, right? Or core content connectors. And goals and assessments. So what are the standards, strands, or core content connectors we're using? How are we using those to create developmentally appropriate ELA literacy and ELD learning goals? And how are we assessing those goals? So taking a look at level 3, the candidate clearly uses information from recent learning and assessments and the focus student's IEP to plan instruction. Then the candidate selects grade level appropriate California State ELA strand standards or developmentally appropriate common core content connectors, and ELD strands and standards for the unit plan. They are not identifying standards by lesson. It's for the whole unit, so they'll just list them out. Then they'll create developmentally appropriate ELA literacy learning goals that include both foundational reading skills and the additional theme for the unit. So they can do a goal or goals, depending upon their choice, but we must see something for foundational reading skills and the additional theme. They will do the same. They'll create developmentally appropriate ELD goals that clearly support the ELA literacy learning goals for the unit. Then they will plan one or more formative assessment in each lesson that clearly connects to the ELA literacy and or ELD learning goal or goals. Now, the formative assessment does not have to measure both ELA and ELD. It might just measure something to do with a foundational reading skill. It might just be something about the additional theme. It might just be about ELD. A formative assessment is not intended to be a summative assessment. It's intended to be something small to give us information so as the candidate is working with the students. Now, this is where the error was, is the candidate plans one summative assessment that clearly measures the ELA literacy and ELD learning goals for the unit. It said and or ELA literacy and or ELD. It needs to be both. So the ELA literacy and ELD learning goals for the unit must be assessed by the summative assessment. And however a candidate does that, it's going to depend a lot on the task that they do. So if, maybe something to do with, for their ELD, there was different graphic organizers and structuring the way that they are providing a summary, and in teaching, the teacher maybe front-loaded some vocabulary, provided these different scaffolds, and also provided some visuals to support the English language development. But when it came to the summative assessment, it's a paragraph without some of those pieces. We'll see the ELD built into the summative assessment. So that's what we're looking for, is we're looking for a summative assessment that is measuring the goals of the unit. And the goals of the unit should include ELA literacy, which is foundational reading skills and additional theme, and English language development. And the candidate's rubric for the summative assessment, it needs to measure the ELA literacy and ELD learning goals. And the last construct here, this one is Julie described this one in the MPA about accuracy of foundational reading skills and the additional theme and integrated ELD. This is part of planning, because we've had some kind of feedback on this one about, what if my candidate is an English learner and may mispronounce something? Will it be counted against them as an error? Well, we wouldn't see that in this construct, because this is the plan. We won't see someone teach and assess. This construct is not in step 2, so they need to plan appropriately. They need to plan correctly. And if we do see something that is just completely incorrect, assessors have been instructed to send it to their lead assessors, and we will have conversations with them about correctness. But if an error is if they say something is one thing and it's really not, I mean, as long as they describe it, we will accept it. So like if they say it's phonics, but it's, I don't know, something else. Sorry, I'm a little sick today, so trying to push through. But if we see that something is a minor issue, like let's say, I don't know. To me, I think a major issue is they teach the sound ah as being like the sound of for b or b, kind of thing. But if we see like a minor issue, and it might move them to a level 2. But if we see major issues with a submission, teaching a foundational reading skill completely incorrectly, such, that'll be pushed up to a lead assessor, and we will make a determination as to how it'll be scored. But it is a new construct. It was an automatic level 1 before, and we are trying to keep the score a process flow where we start with a level 3 and then we move to 2 and then 1. Taking a look at level 2, everything in a level 2, they add and ors and vague. The word vague it's just not clear. Somebody's looking at it and they're like, oh, I'm not really sure about this. I don't really see it here. That's going to get a candidate a level 2. And if it's just missing, not there, we don't see it, they don't include it, that's a level 1. But a 3 is an A. That's what we need. That's meeting the teacher performance expectation. A level 4 and a level 5 in these rubric constructs are all going to be a level 3 target construct, more in detail with more requirements. So like a level 4 in this rubric is candidate plans multiple formative assessments within each lesson of the unit to monitor the focus students' ELA literacy and ELD understandings. So we would see more than one piece of evidence in their unit plan about formative assessment. So a 3 is 1 formative assessment per lesson. A 4 is more than 1 formative assessments within each lesson. A level 5, when developing that summative assessment and corresponding rubric or performance criteria, the candidate includes a real-life scenario that builds upon their culture, language, and or experiences. And again, levels 4 and 5 are not required. They are just extra bonus work, extra icing on the cake, above and beyond. So they are not required. They are just additional things that we are happy to see for candidates to complete. All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next page here. So rubric 2.2, this is all about the actual lessons or activities that are planned within the unit. So how does that candidate leverage student assets and our interests and use UDL strategies to plan that aligned series of lessons that build upon one another to create that progression of learning? How do they address foundational reading skills using that direct, systematic, and explicit approach? Actively engage the focus student in the additional theme. And I believe for early childhood, you're looking at emergent foundational reading skills. And then with the additional theme, it's more of that play-based approach, and integrate ELD to support the focus student. And the last component here is that collaboration and or facilitation of instructional support personnel. So at a level 3, the candidate leverages student assets. They use their assets to move the learning forward. At a level 3, for the second construct, they plan to use appropriate UDL strategies when teaching the ELA literacy and or ELD content. They don't have to use UDL strategies for both, but it's always helpful. That's why there's an and or there. The unit plan includes 3 lessons that align and build upon one another. We were looking to see that we have goals for this unit. Lesson 1, lesson 2, and lesson 3 gets us there. So how do they build upon one another to create that progression of learning? When planning to teach the foundational reading skills, the candidate uses a direct, systematic, and explicit approach. The candidate actively engages the focus student within the additional theme. And the plan integrates ELD that supports foundational reading skills and the additional theme. ELD should be supporting both foundational reading skills and the additional theme. The candidate includes adaptations that clearly address the focus student's assets and/or interests and learning needs, and they include a clear plan for collaboration with and/or facilitation of instructional support personnel. Looking at this rubric for a level 4, they are leveraging assets and interests intentionally by incorporating cultural background, lived experiences, and our primary languages. And to get to a level 5, each lesson includes multiple UDL strategies to support that focus student in meeting the ELA literacy and ELD learning goals. Now, I know that these rubrics are pretty dense because we only have 2 rubrics for planning, and there's a whole lot of planning that goes into a unit. So it is important for candidates to go through and ensure that they meet each one of these level 3 constructs. And something that we've talked to program faculty about is turning each one of these constructs into a question and then asking candidates to go back and identify that evidence. So in their planning, candidate clearly leverages student assets and our interests. So in their planning, how does the candidate clearly leverage student assets and our interests? Where is the evidence? Because what assessors do is they go through each of these constructs and they ask themselves, is it there or is it not? If it's there, then they take essentially a screenshot of the evidence and put it into a folder. And they use those screenshots of evidence to make a judgment on a rubric. And so asking candidates to do the same thing, look at those constructs, turn it into a question, identify the evidence, have them go through it themselves, then have them go through it with a partner. So that way they can ask, is this enough? Is it clear to you? We've seen assessors recommend to candidates about, making sure that they are bolding some key words. That way it calls it out for assessors. It helps by bulleting some things out, by organizing the way that they are structuring. This is not an assessment of writing. It's not, there's no rubric constructs in any space for grammar or punctuation, but using proper grammar and punctuation is always helpful. That way you're not distracting. But we want to make sure that as you're going through, checking to make sure these things are there, starting each sentence. We've seen we've seen programs who help candidates with the sentence starters on some of the prompts. So that way it helps to focus them and calling out any prompts with multiple parts. So a candidate addresses both parts of the prompt. All right. Any questions on planning? All right. So teach and assess. This is where we let the camera rolls, where the action happens, where all the fun things go on. And this is where the candidate is teaching their 3 planned lessons and corresponding formative and summative assessments. They should video record. There is a requirement that last year there was a condition code previously for visibility of students. This year we have brought some of that back where we need to see and hear the teacher candidate with students. We don't have to see faces, but we do need to see and hear students. And assessors have been instructed that if they see a video that just does not look right, like a candidate is teaching to an empty room and you don't see then or hear people, then they need to send that out and send it up because it is a requirement of this assessment. It's a performance assessment that we see a performance of the work. So, okay.
Just can you repeat that last part that was missed? They want to repeat the answer about seen and heard.
Oh, okay. Was that what you're asking, Keith, here, or were you asking about the question that Samantha asked? I just wasn't sure because it's like linked to that chat. But for candidates, they need to see and hear. We need to see and hear the students, and you're working with one student or a group in this. So, Okay, so the question that Samantha asked about if the candidate should explicitly describe why their summative assessment doesn't have foundational skills. No, they don't need to describe that because, again, that summative assessment, it just depends on what they're asking the students to do. So if they are asking the students to write some type of an opinion paragraph based on some something that they have read or listened to, and the foundational reading skill has to do with fluency, they would not have an explicit construct for fluency in their summative assessment, but they would need fluency to be able to do the task. So they don't necessarily have to have a specific construct for foundational reading skills. If the task includes it's necessary to have foundational reading skills in that piece. I'm sorry if that is a little bit convoluted. Yeah, and same deal for ELD. Yes, absolutely. If it's absolutely necessary to complete that task, to write that opinion paragraph, you need that ELD structure, you need that foundational reading skill and that additional theme to get there, because that's the goal. That is the goal of the unit. That's what we're working on. Okay. So the video clip emphasis areas: foundational reading skills, additional theme, integrated ELD, and assessment of literacy. So that's a little bit of a shift. Again, like I said earlier, the requirement for specific actionable feedback has been shifted out of step 2, and it's only in step 3. So let's go ahead and head over to the rubrics, because the commentary prompts are aligned with all of the rubrics, and the template that Julie showed you about the commentary is the same for the LPA. So first question here is about foundational reading skills with a direct and explicit approach. So the first construct, you'll notice that term demonstration and description. Again, we need to see it in video and have it described in commentary. When you get to a level 2, it's unclear demonstration or an unclear description. So we can have a really good demonstration and an unclear description, and we're at a level 2. These need to be intentional. And so I'm going to just close my door. It's Gardner.
I think you should just bring Reese into the video.
Yeah, sorry. I just have a really rascally Boston Terrier, and on Thursdays are the days because garbage day is Friday, so we have a lot of gardeners in the community, and so sorry about that.
We really couldn't hear him bark though. I mean,
Okay, good.
I barely heard that last one.
He's just like right here. Okay, so looking at a level 3 here, this is another space where we need to see how they actively engage the focus student in teaching the foundational reading skills. And the last construct here, there needs to be a demonstration and description of the literacy lessons described in step 1 in step 2. We actually have had, somebody show up to office hours and really upset because he didn't understand that what he planned in step 1 needed to be demonstrated in step 2 and then reflected on in step 3. Why couldn't they all just be different lessons? They're different things. So this was an automatic level 1 before. We built it out into a 3-2-1. I'm looking at a level 4 here, that they are modeling the targeted foundational reading skills, and that the level 5 is where they formatively assess the foundational reading skills through the lessons and structures frequent opportunities for the focused student to respond and receive feedback from the teacher. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the next rubric. Trying to be mindful of time.
Oh, just pointing out, you mentioned earlier, the foundational reading skills are listed under the rubrics.
Yes, thank you, Julie. Thank you. Okay, 2.4. This is leveraging assets and interests to actively engage students in the additional theme. So construct on level 3, that's leveraging those assets and interests. And the second construct there is a clear how they actively engage students in the additional theme. Now, level 4, this is where we're incorporating cultural backgrounds and lived experiences. And level 5, again, that collaboratively explore additional themes through discussion, writing, and or reading. And they can collaborate with the teacher. They can collaborate with an instructional support personnel. You don't necessarily have to have two kids sitting together collaborating, as it might not be appropriate for the placement or for the way that the child communicates. We can go ahead and go to 2.5. This is where the candidate is using UDL strategies and integrated ELD when teaching the foundational reading skills. So the candidate is asked to use at least one UDL strategy and when teaching ELA and or ELD. Now, we asked candidates to plan for ELA and ELD, but we do recognize that 20 minutes of video over the course of multiple days of instructions is not necessarily enough. And so if they submit a video where they're using a UDL strategy to support foundational reading skills, but not necessarily the ELD, that's fine. We just need to see it for foundational reading skills, additional theme, or ELD content. And the next one there is integrate ELD to support the teaching of foundational reading skills and or additional theme. So we're looking for ELD that supports either the foundational reading skill or the additional theme, or both, if the candidate is able to do that. Looking at a level 4, this is around the foundational reading skills and the additional theme, orally in writing or through performance. And a level 5, multiple UDL strategies used to support the teaching of ELA literacy and or ELD learning goals. So we'd see multiple UDL strategies in video. Okay, let's take a look at 2.6. This is where the candidate is using formative assessments to monitor learning and respond intentionally. So we're looking at, like I said, multiple formative assessments to monitor the student's progress and then responding intentionally, whatever that means, whether it's an adjustment of instruction, whether we have to get some new resources, whatever it is that we're doing to respond intentionally to it's a data-driven decision making based on that formative assessment. To get to a level 4, these are some multiple formative assessments we would be able to see in video, purposeful questioning, academic discussion, any kind of real-time checks for understanding. And to be at a level 5, this is where a candidate would analyze the responses during instruction and identify patterns and any misconceptions, and then adapt instruction in meaningful ways. All right. Any questions on any of the video requirements? Again, demonstrate and describe is going to be a key term this academic year, because candidates can't just write it in their commentary and get credit for the evidence. We need to be able to see it. All right. So when they get to step 3, this is where they are engaging. After they have engaged the student in the summative assessment, they score that summative assessment. Then they look at the results to determine misunderstandings and understandings of the ELA literacy and ELD learning goals. And based on that, they are going to create, or they're going to submit and give to the student some summative assessment feedback. So if you scroll down a little bit. Yeah, so this is where they are providing that specific actionable feedback based on the assessment of their summative assessment to the student, and it can be spoken, signed, any way that the candidate provides that feedback is acceptable there. We can keep scrolling down. Now, the next piece is that family guardian feedback. So after they provide the specific actionable feedback to the focus student, the candidate is then tasked with contacting the family or guardians to provide feedback, either written, conference call, phone call, to support them in understanding the assessment results and what they can do to support the student beyond the classroom. Go ahead and scroll down. So then the candidate is asked to then analyze and reflect upon the focus student's work. So let's go ahead and head to the rubric for this, I think. Okay. So this is another pretty dense rubric because there are a lot of different key components to the reflection piece. But starting with the top of level 3, their reflection includes a clear analysis of the focus students' summative assessment results. Then, based on that analysis and the information they gathered while teaching, they clearly identify understandings and misconceptions related to the focus students' progress towards meeting the ELA literacy and ELD goals. Then the candidate needs to provide some specific actionable feedback for that focus student and a clear description of the impact of their instructional approaches and their choices of activities. Next, they would provide a clear explanation of instructional changes that they would make if they taught the unit again, and that they provide clear feedback to the family and guardians of the focus student so they can support the student in how they can move learning beyond the classroom. Taking a look at a level 4, the candidate-specific actionable feedback for the focus student is aligned to the learning goals of the unit. The big thing here is that they are giving some really strong, concrete, clear examples from the information that they gathered in steps 1 and 2. And a level 5 is when reflecting upon the impact of instruction, that those specific examples in teaching or commentary and data. So they're using and providing more data, and that's the difference between like a level 4 and a 5. Level 4 is more strengths and needs, examples. Level 5 is really getting into that data and describing the impact of their instruction. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the follow-up instruction. We can go ahead, go straight over to the rubric because much of what they are doing here is outlined in this rubric. So the candidate, they look at everything. They look at their plan. They look at their teaching. They look at the results of the summative assessment and their analysis, and they make a determination. They say, do these students need to move forward, or does the student need to get something on next, or do we need to reteach something? So the candidate includes a clear plan for follow-up instruction, either reteaching or extension, based on their performance during the unit, including the summative assessment results. Then they are going to do follow-up instruction, and they will video record that. And they'll choose either reteach or extension based on the evidence. And if they are reteaching, it's an individualized strategy to support the focus student's progress. If it's an extension, instruction that deepens and or advances. Now, taking a look at the third construct, or the last construct here, is that the candidate needs to use specific examples from steps 1, 2, and or 3 to support their follow-up instruction. So similar to how we did this in the math performance assessment, the candidate needs to reach back and say, in this component, this happened and this is why. And so a specific example, not just saying in step 1, because of step 1 I did this. No, what's specific in there. Taking a look at a level 4, they are leveraging assets and interests by intentionally incorporating cultural, linguistic, or lived experiences in the follow-up instruction design. And for a level 5, they're synthesizing multiple sources of evidence from steps 1, 2, and 3 to justify their decisions. Are there any questions that I can answer or anything I did not catch in the chat about the LPA and some of the updates for this academic year?
Chat's been quiet. It's a lot to take in.
Yes. Hopefully you all can see the through line of planning for a unit and how the unit kind of gets put into 3 parts of the lessons, with the summative assessment being at the end, what we're looking for in the unit, in the teaching, how someone is going to look at that summative assessment and what happens in the unit to make determinations about what's coming next. But that's the through line there.
Marissa, I have a question.
Yes.
So sometimes our candidates, like interns who are teaching high school math, they really struggle with foundational reading skills, literacy skills. So what do you suggest for us as a faculty? How can we support them?
So they're special education teachers that are assigned primarily in a math class?
Yes, they are interns. They are teaching math in high school. They are special education teachers, yes.
Right. So they would need a space where they're able to teach literacy. And so however they're able to find that space, that's going to be up to the individual candidate and the program. They should still be taking coursework around literacy and foundational reading skills, and they should still they're still tasked with this work, even if their clinical practice placement is solely in math.
So we do have all those things, like they are taking literacy courses. My question is, they struggle embedding foundational literacy into math. And you talked about like a front loading the vocabulary or teaching the math vocabulary. So, or additional skills. Do you have any samples or examples that we can use with our candidates? They can successfully embed those literacy skills into math.
No, we don't have anything like that because candidates are supposed to be teaching multiple different pieces, but we can have a conversation about that at a later time because that's a much deeper question as to how a candidate is able to complete a complete a performance assessment that doesn't necessarily align with their clinical practice placement. We have and we do recognize that there are challenges in placement, and they may just need to pull one student and work with them on a literacy skill instead of working with an entire class. But it's a challenge completing anything when their clinical practice placement doesn't align with the content.
Okay, thank you. We'll reach out to you then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are a lot of suggestions. I thank you, Bev, about literacy and math, problem solving, vocabulary, reading. There's a lot of those different pieces, and I have seen like candidates that are teaching like a math science in a middle school level on a multiple subjects credential do like a 3-read protocol for the literacy components. The challenge often does become the foundational reading skill and how that is embedded. And so for this, it may just be that they have to do something outside of their regular clinical practice placement. Samantha?
Sorry, I clarified my question in the chat. I work with Fatmana, and so I was following up.
Okay.
Okay. I think Crystal had her hand up.
I was just going to chime in and kind of share how our program handles that because we do have some candidates in EdSped settings who are maybe just teaching one content area for the most part, or maybe just a narrower content area. And so what we do is we just have a communication with the district and the site supervisors just to ensure, hey, I understand that this person is hired to just provide math and science support. However, they are still going to have to do literacy for this assessment. So I always get the go ahead in writing from the district that they understand the teacher is going to have to do this. And then I also connect with the district, or I ask them to connect that teacher with an ELA mentor. So they all get their district mentor who probably is going to, I don't know, maybe teach math or science or whatever that main content area is. But I always make sure that the district understands that they're going to need to find additional support to connect them with that person. So it takes a little bit of extra work on our end, but it is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions about the LPA before we head back to the presentation and finish up today?
There's one in the chat. I don't know if it was covered already. Beverly?
Oh, the literacy and math classes involve problem solving? Absolutely, yeah. I see a question about accommodations for students with disabilities. Whatever your institutional policies are for accommodations, that is something that folks should follow in coursework. There are accommodations that are available for candidates to complete performance assessment. Um, they are all listed on the website. Maybe we could grab that and put in the chat while by the end of this. But we do have accommodations that people can follow. There's nothing for more time because it's a self-driven performance assessment, but there is quite a bit of evidence that a candidate would have to submit in order to receive some of those accommodations on performance assessment. And we'll finish up this and then I'll go ahead and get that to you. So
I'll try to find the link as well. It's on the ES website.
yeah, it's on the ES website. Okay, sorry. As far as condition codes, we have a link in this presentation, which will be PDF and put into the resource folder after today's presentation. But we do have some updated condition codes for the academic year. Again, there are no content-based condition codes. They are all to do with the materials that a candidate uploads, and we need a complete submission, and we need videos that we can listen to and see. We need all the different components. If it says that it could just be an audio recording, like the summative assessment feedback, specific actionable feedback in step 3 of the LPA, that's just fine. But we need to be able to see it. We need to be able to read it. We need to be able to access it. So there's a link there, and go over those with candidates before they get going. We have some deep dives that we've already held, and here we are kind of right in the middle, and we're going to be finishing out strong with our DHH and VI deep dives coming up in September. And we will put a link to this video in the EQ Weekly, so you'll be able to have access that way. Acceptable supports webinar that's coming up next week for those of you who are wanting just a refresher on what is acceptable to and how to support candidates and what is unacceptable when supporting a candidate. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Some coordinator meetings. You can write these down in your calendar so that way you know the dates and times. You can go ahead and start registering to get the Zoom links to be able to attend. We have a new coordinator orientation coming up in September on the 9th from 9 to noon. If you are an experienced coordinator but want to come back for a refresher, you're more than welcome to attend, but it will be geared for folks who are just getting started with CalTPA, CalAPA, and EdSp CalTPA. We can go ahead and go. We have some digging deeper webinars that we have planned. We'll be talking about focus students and UDL that works in October, ELA, our ELD, ALD support, reflect and apply, making some data-driven decision making, and then a look ahead. So we have these on the calendar, and these are opportunities for other programs to come in and have conversations with you about how they do that, and it's a space to build together. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so we have some faculty workshops coming up, and what we plan to do with these is like an assessor light training, where we will go through the requirements and theory of action around the performance assessments, and then go through some pre-scored submissions with you. The first one, staff will lead you through the submission and identify where evidence was found. And then if you come with other folks from your team, you can break up into groups, or you can make new friends that day, because we'll be putting folks in teams of 3, 4, depending upon who participates, to go through a submission and identify evidence themselves. And then it is a pre-scored submission, but it won't be marked. And so that way a candidate, you as your program can go through and identify the evidence like an assessor does, and be able to see why a score was that specific score. So we do have these dates coming up. They are 3-hour webinars each. We'll do math and literacy on separate days. It's going to be a detailed process, and we will not be recording this. The reason why we will not record is because there is going to be video evidence, and we do not want to put video evidence on our YouTube channels. we will be most likely blurring out videos, but out of an abundance of caution, we will not be recording these. So if you are unable to attend, you can attend one of the other subject matter areas. And it's really the process of how scoring goes, not necessarily the evidence that, but it is helpful if you can attend in your own area. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So we have this year in the June commission meeting, there was an item for pass rates and networked supports. There will be a multiple measures report that will be delivered to each institution in November. If your first attempt pass rate is below 70%, then there will be some additional tasks for your institution to participate in. But these are supports that are available to all programs, whether your pass rate is above 70% or below. But this will be an opportunity to learn about the multiple measures report and continuous improvement, taking a look at analyzing program data in January, creating those action plans, and implementing those action plans. And for those of you that are looking at your program standards, you'll see that there are program standards for continuous improvement. And by attending some of these different events and engaging with this activity, it works and meets for your program review. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Meredith Fellows Implementation Conference. It's coming up. We're going to, in February, mark your calendar. We're going to be looking at best practices for intentional integration of performance assessment. So the intentional integration, which means how we are teaching through the TPA. Next slide, please. Contact information. You'll notice that if you look at the resource folder, there is a spreadsheet in there. We pulled all of the most up-to-date coordinators on August 7th. Okay, so take a look at that document. If you have updated since August 7th, that document does not just automatically get populated. It's a pulled document that we get at one time. Every submission window, when there's condition codes or questions or what have you, we pull a new document. And we want to make sure that the most up-to-date contact information is on there. Now, if after you watch this meeting, you're like, I'm just going to go ahead and email Julie and tell her that we have a new coordinator, Julie will say, okay, I will forward your email to this ADS system because we cannot go in there and update it. It seems like we should be able to, but we can't. Only institutional representatives can update their own institutional contacts. So there is instructions on how to do that, but if you are still having a hard time with that, you can email the annual data system at ctc.ca.gov for support. They will be able to support you and your program in updating that contact information. Good. Some email, performance assessment email lists. You can subscribe, and we don't send out a whole lot of emails, but when we do have information, we like to put them out here and then in the EQ Weekly. If those of you that are new to this world and you're not familiar, that EQ Weekly is that Friday newsletter that has lots and lots of different information from the commission. Please make sure that you are subscribing to that email list. And I know the performance assessment can get buried kind of in the end there, but typically right at the top is the new items, and then as you just got to scroll down to find us in performance assessment. We do have office hours that are going to resume in September. So all of this is going to start again in September. Program office hours, first and third Fridays from 9 to 10. At that meeting, we also do have representatives from ES. So Pearson folks are also in those office hours. Candidate office hours, Wednesdays from 4:15 to 5 o'clock. Candidates are more than welcome to come on down and ask us some questions. And we do also have at that office hour representatives from Pearson. So if they have any questions, they can come into that space. We will be resuming our PLCs coming up in the month of September. So any idea you have, any topic of conversation that you'd like to start us off with, that's what we will be doing. It's a space, it's an open forum, it's a space for you to come together as a community and to have a conversation. And the link will be the same for every PLC. And we do have a fantabulous calendar that is on our website that has links to all of these different pieces and events. Let's go ahead and go. And thank you all for your attendance and participation today. To contact us, CalTPA at ctc.ca.gov, EdSped CalTPA at ctc.ca.gov, or CalAPA at ctc.ca.gov. And you can get a hold of us. And again, check out our website. We've been working on it and putting some new things on there, and we want it to be a good resource for folks to be able to access materials and resources for performance assessment.
And with that, I think I will stop recording and just say thank you, everyone. We'll stay on for questions. Thank you for attending our deep dive today.